What does online only student ministry look like? Are you ready to find out? Because it's time.
You're listening to the Church Digital Sidekick Podcast, part of the TCD Podcast Network.
Hey, heroes, my name is Tom Pounder, and this is the Church Digital Sidekick Podcast. This is the podcast where I talk to ministry leaders and we talk about how you can do ministry more effectively in this very digital and online world. And today I'm really excited because I have Taylor Terpstra on. And again, I've said I'm really excited about these interviews before, but this one got me super, super excited because Taylor, to my knowledge, is the first ever online only student minister. That's right, online only student minister. What is he doing? How did he get this job? We talk about all this stuff today in the podcast. So I'm really excited to have Taylor on and for him to share his encouragement, what he's discovered about online ministry to students, what that looks like, and how that could look like for you in your church. Is it even possible for you in your church? We're going to talk about all that in today's interview. But before we do that, I do want to highlight the Church Digital real quick. At the Church Digital, we have a ton of different podcasts in our podcast network, and we also have a lot of coaching and cohorts starting up. So if you want to learn how to do digital or phygital or even metaverse ministry, go to the Church Digital right now, hit on the equipping page to get in one of the cohorts or get some coaching, but also go to the podcast page where you can see about all the different podcasts that are happening to encourage you in your online and digital ministry, actually even in your whole ministry, because we've got a lot of different voices encouraging people in ministry in general. So I want to encourage you to check out the Church.digital in our equipping page and the podcast page today. All right, so let's get an interview right now talking to Taylor about how he's doing online ministry and what that might look like for you in your ministry. All right, with me right now is Taylor Terpstra. Taylor, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. You're out in California, right?
Yes, California.
That is awesome. See, we're on opposite coasts because I'm out in DC and you're out in California. So
Insane.
to get us started on this, let's just go through about what you do and how you got started in that.
Yeah, so I am the online youth lead at Sandals Church, which already sounds interesting as a title for sure. I got there during the pandemic, so I was hired right at the end of 2020. And December was like my first start date, so I started right before Christmas. But yeah, I basically was at another church called River Valley Church in Minnesota. That's where I was living previously.
Nice.
And during COVID, I was helping with like social media and online services as everyone transitioned to online only. We did as well. And I had been on that team in some various roles, but I, at that time, was specifically doing like social media work, trying to grow those channels. And that was something I was passionate about. So when online hit, it was like, they basically were like, tapped me on the shoulder and were like, hey, can you help out with this? We don't really know like what we're doing. And we think you might have like a good gauge on it. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a crack at it. And so came up with like an online service, started doing stuff on YouTube, and realized that everyone doesn't necessarily have the gifts and talents or likes to do that type of stuff, but I really loved it. So for some, COVID was really draining, really hard, and really challenging. But I would say the opposite. The pandemic was awesome. And like not the pandemic side, but in the way that it forced churches to work differently, to think differently. Doing ministry online was something that I found was like, this is like my lane. And I wish that this was happened sooner. Yeah. And so grew a YouTube channel. We had at that church at the time, like I think 300 subscribers before COVID. And then by the end of my time there, we were at like 1,800 subscribers on YouTube, which was more. Yeah, it's crazy, which was more than what our audience was in person for students. Like the church ran around 800 students on a Wednesday night across multiple campuses. So we grew our youth audience by quite a bit. And so that was like kind of where I knew I wanted to do something different in ministry. And I came across a post. I knew Justin Knowles from afar. He's a legend in the youth ministry world, and he's now my boss. He had posted something, I think, like on his Facebook about they were thinking about hiring someone to do online stuff for youth. And I remember seeing that and being like, that's interesting. That could be cool. And not really like thinking too deeply into it, but I remember like a flag in my mind popped up. Like I remember clearly seeing it, reading it, being interested in it, and but not like pursuing it or anything like that. And then he posted another post and was like, guys, remember when I posted about that online like thing we were thinking about? It's a position, it's real. There's a job description, like come work with us. And I basically like I messaged him and I was like, dude, like I don't know really much about this, but I know that I think this is something that I want to do. I'm really passionate about it, and I think that this could be cool. And so we talked, chatted, several interviews down the road, um, all remote, by the way, all remote interviews. And then I ended up at Sandals Church. It was the right fit for sure. Um, is super cool. Like even like the job description has changed so much since I've gotten here, obviously.
Yeah.
But right now I work for the online campus. So we treat our online audience like a campus, and we have sermons on the weekend that are live streamed specifically for online with online chat hosts, all that. So I help with some of the weekend stuff. So that's some of my responsibility. And then I produce and edit the service for Wednesday nights for youth online. And then so the produce and editing side is part of my job. And then also extra content as well to engage our online audience. And we can talk more about it later, but it's more so like we're really finding that online is very different than in person. So you can't really just like regurgitate what church has looked like for the last 20 years. You really have to adapt and change quite a bit of things to make it make sense on YouTube and really reach people. So
Dude, this is awesome. This is better than I even anticipated it to be. So this is fantastic. So okay, so were you doing student ministry before you got sucked into online
yeah.
ministry? So okay, so that's a typical story. That seems like a lot of student ministers get put into that. Did you have any reservations about going from in-person hands-on student ministry to doing online stuff?
It's actually crazy. So I at the time had stepped down from being like a traditional like youth pastor. I led a campus, had like in-person ministry, did the whole like weekly gathering, big events, all of that stuff for a little while, and was like feeling not like, I don't know, it was more so like just really like, is this really like what I'm supposed to do kind of? But knowing that I was really passionate about student ministry, but not necessarily knowing if like the role didn't feel right,
Yeah.
basically. It didn't like fit in every essence. And I remember really like praying about it and being like, God, what's next for me? Like this is like what I've banked most of my life on and like have pursued quite a bit, and like what's next? Because like if I can't be this, then like what does that mean for me? And it's crazy because I like always go back to this, but I watched a Gary Vee video just
Nice. I
scrolling
love
on
Gary
social
Vee.
media.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude. So watched the Gary Vee video, and it was someone that had like called in and asked about specifically about church and social media, and they were asking him like, um, if all of these businesses are like doing all of these things to market their product to people and like get this in front of people, like social media and all of these, it was like about advertising and sending all these like paid ads on Facebook and all this stuff. He's like, and churches are still handing out like flyers. It's like, why? Like, he's like, have they fallen behind? Is there any chance that the church can catch up and like do what businesses do in terms of reaching people? And he's like, he said something that was really interesting, and it really struck me. Of like, he said along the lines of it is possible, but they have to put in the work in order to advance themselves to the place of realizing that the world, like he didn't say the world, but I would say the world is doing everything to reach people. And so like the church isn't
Mhm.
basically. And so that like struck me and was like a very like convicting thing. And so I spent about like I stepped down, I spent about like 7 or 8 months teaching myself like I like went to YouTube University in terms of like video editing, Photoshop, learned about like I took like a Facebook advertising class, like all these like weird things that I felt like would matter in
Yeah.
the long run. And I just like was passionate about absorbing as much information in terms of how do businesses operate in terms of marketing to people, in terms of getting the word out, in terms of being in front of people, and then like how do we translate that, not in a way of like we want to be gimmicky or we want to sell things, but like because we have the best, like we have the best product, we have the answer for people. And so like if we're not trying to put that in front and using every tool that's available to us, then we're missing it. And so um that's what got me in. So I never had any reservation, I would say, about like transitioning from in-person ministry to online ministry. In fact, I'd say I'm probably more comfortable in online ministry because it truly feels like this is like what God has had planned all along.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm really excited for just like being where I am in terms of the growth. And even like, I think post COVID is kind of like the term that's being thrown around, but in the online world, COVID really shaped like how people interacted with the internet and even specifically with church. And so now that we're post COVID, I think that we're going to see another like big shift in terms of how people interact online. And so I'm just glad that I'm in this space that I get to explore and learn and innovate. And I think that that's what's cool is that every day is different. Every week something changes.
Yes.
So yeah, man.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm very similar to you in the sense that when I took over and did some online ministry, I wasn't doing online student ministry, but I was doing online ministry. I I
Mhm,
I had no training whatsoever. I went to school to be a youth pastor. And so
mhm.
I wanted to do student ministry, and then this opportunity came about years ago, and I had to self teach myself. And I love how you just went on YouTube and did all those classes and you learned about Facebook ads. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not rocket science, but it's accessible. It's really
Totally.
there. If you want to learn, you will be able to learn because there's lots of tools out there for you to learn. I love what you're doing. This just gets me all excited. Is there some element of your job right now that you do that you're just loving? Like, what is something that you're just loving to do right now?
Yeah. So for there's a couple things I would say, but I'd say the top two things are one, I manage our Twitch team. So we have a team of youth lead volunteers that are youth leads in person at a campus, but they volunteer some of their hours of the week to actually play video games. I know it's so sacrificial, but um they they will they stream live. So right now we stream live twice a week on Twitch, and we do it for mostly our both in person and online. Whoever wants to join can join and hang out. And the whole premise of it is to create a safe place for our students to game and have community, even like in a niche environment, like gaming. We just want to provide like all the access that's possible. Something that's a word that's thrown around a lot, specifically at Sandals, is omni-channel. So like we want to be on every channel. We want to be very accessible by people, and that goes for students too. So there is students on Twitch, so we're creating a community on Twitch and Discord, growing that. That's been something that I've really loved because I love video games personally. I think it's a cool community, and I think um, I see a really great future in that for our student ministry, and even for we've already seen students come to physical locations because of Twitch. We've seen students give their life to Jesus because of Twitch, because they've gotten plugged into community by that. And I think that that's just the easy primer and example that like that's something that can continue to grow and be big. Um, the other thing that I really am passionate about is something that hasn't even released yet, but we're starting this year to do a YouTube show. So right now, just on YouTube is our sermons and a few extra content that goes up every now and then. But now every single week, starting in February, we're gonna have a YouTube show, basically a podcast like this kind of that is that is dedicated to students' questions. It's called the For Real Show, and we're gonna bring on experts and guests and students and all of that stuff, and I'll be interviewing them, talking to them about whatever topic we're talking about that day. But the whole premise of the show is to create an environment where people can ask questions. They don't have to have the answers, and they can sit in a questioning environment and be really comfortable in it. Because we're finding that sermons specifically sometimes are too deep for people right away. Um, when someone goes to church in person, they choose and they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. Not that they know what church is like or gonna have but they're gonna have some preconceived notions of what they're getting themselves into, and they're kind of accepting it by going there. When you're online, the church is actually stepping into someone else's space. And so we can't expect them to follow our rules, um, our set standard of what a service runtime is, service looks like, all of these things. And so this show is trying to like step into that space and say like, we know we're in your space, but we have some thoughts, we have some opinions, we have some things we'd like to talk about with you, but we want to hold it in a place that's very open and receiving to any question and whatever. So we want to talk about the hard stuff, the real stuff.
Yeah.
And we want to hear from students, we want to hear questions. So there's always going to be an option for students to text in questions. So that's something that I'm really excited about. It's my brainchild, something that we're going to have releasing every single week. It's to widen our funnel so that there's more people that can access our content. And then from there, if those questions don't get resolved in the conversation, then maybe they check out a sermon and they can get those questions further resolved by hearing some more from the Word of God and things like that. So
Dude, this is awesome. I love this because again, people go to YouTube to get questions answered, and if you're answering the questions, you've got a great audience there. Are you going to do this show live or is it pre-recorded?
all of our stuff is pre-recorded right now, except for some of our Twitch. So the show will definitely be pre-recorded. The reason for that is also like uh, quality for one, and two, like I would say like we try to pre-record a lot of stuff so that it saves time. And so we're a pretty big church, and so there's a lot of people that need to use the facilities. We have a studio at the church, and so like we record in studio. We have some days reserved of the month, and so we'll record all 4 episodes that we'll release that month in one day.
Okay.
Because efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So, and I edit everything, so then it gives me a nice long runway to
Yeah.
edit and do all the post-production stuff. So
That's cool. Do you do you have a separate Sandals Youth channel, or is it all under the Sandals Church channel, and then you have a separate playlist or something like that?
no, so we do have our own youth YouTube channel. Sandals Church has the main YouTube channel, and then I think we're under there as like followed channels.
Okay.
So like they will see like if they go to Sandals Church's YouTube channel, they'll see like we have a youth YouTube channel, we have a worship YouTube channel, and we have a kids YouTube channel. And those are like our big categories right now. Who knows what they'll be in the future, but that's what it is right now. And then if you go to our YouTube channel, there's playlists of like all of our sermon series, different things like that. It's pretty organized. It looks pretty good. But it's cool that you asked this because yesterday I actually met with a pretty large YouTube producer for a YouTube channel that has a ridiculous amount of following that I don't even want to say because it's embarrassing. But they they're a volunteer for Sandals Church, and so they're gonna be they're gonna be helping like analyze our videos. So I'm actually sending them our analytics every single week after a video, and they just give us advice. And they're like, whether you take the advice or not is up to you, but like, here's my opinion on it. And so
That's
I'm
cool.
excited to get some of our first reports back to start changing and tweaking some things to help fit the YouTube model a little bit better, because um, there has been a lot of shifting. And like I said, we're trying to really fit like not the church model, but more so like a YouTube model that has church stuff in it. So
That's great. I love again your omni-channel approach on the sense that you've got YouTube stuff. You're doing specific things here on YouTube. You got stuff on Twitch. You got Discord. Where have you found, if it's possible? I mean, where have you found the most engagement? Is there something that you're doing? I'm sure it's not like Twitter or something like that. Or are you doing TikTok?
yeah. So we're doing TikTok for sure. So we're our main channels for we I would say this is tough. So we do I would divide it by like social media, and then there's video content. So our video content would be YouTube and Twitch. Like that's strictly like longer form video, whether it's live streamed or like pre-recorded, that's YouTube, Twitch. And then social media, which would be really short form, like everything under 2 minutes, video, photo, whatever, that's Instagram, TikTok. And then we also have Snapchat as well. So uh, yeah, so those are our three channels. I don't personally manage the social media channels. That would be way too much for me to do, but I am in charge of the video side. So Twitch and YouTube, that's like my oversight. And then social media has someone else that's on the youth team. They run that stuff, but we partner together and collaborate pretty much on everything that goes across all channels, because it plays into online. It also plays into like in person as well. So the way that I view it is like, if it's a win for online, usually it's a win for in person as well, because it's getting the word out to people. So that's kind of how we've ran things for the last year. I've only been on staff for a little over a year now. So yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome. Okay, so dude, I could probably talk to you for a really long time. So we might have to have follow-up conversations on this. But what, as great as things have been going, have there been any challenges that you've encountered while doing this?
Yeah. I would say the number one challenge is groups. We have been so Sandals is really like groups and community oriented. Like if there's an end game for somebody like at our church, it's getting them plugged into a group.
Mhm.
And so when I came on staff as the online youth lead, they're like, we need digital groups. We want to see students going into digital groups. But as that like mandate was given, as the work started happening, and as we were like fleshing out like, what does this look like? How do we get this happening? We ran some groups for the year. And we realized that getting a student to go from an anonymous username on YouTube to a known face in a Google Meet or Zoom call, whether it's with other students or just you, the leader, like that is a challenge,
Mm.
because most students, if they're in person, have no problem doing that. But if they're coming for the first time or checking it out, like they're not going to do that. And so most of our groups that were digital were meeting digital because of the pandemic. So they either weren't comfortable coming back to church yet, or there was some other reasons. And so like they were tuning in digitally to small group. Totally cool, totally fine. But as the pandemic lightened up, as things started getting better, we have seen like that decrease in our groups. And so my challenge has been, how do we operate, how do we do groups, and like what's that going to look like in the year 2022? How do we not even necessarily do groups, but how do we facilitate the same feeling of community, where it's not just like content driven, it's not just It's not just like, hey, check out this video, we're going to talk in the chat during the premiere and hang out, like whatever. I genuinely am trying to like create like what would be considered digital community where students are engaging not just like in the content, but also with each other, with the leaders, all of that stuff. And so I've tried a couple of things. We've landed on a couple of things for the year. Whether they work or not, I'll let you know later. But um, what we're going to be doing for this next year is we're doing a Bible study open house is kind of what I'm calling it. So what that looks like is 3 times a week, I am going to be live streaming a daily reading plan from our app. So basically that's 3 different platforms at 3 different times. And I'm calling it an open house because it's come and go, like whatever you want to do, come check it out. Come, don't hang out at all, like whatever you want to do. And the premise of this is during those times and places that we're live, because making it live makes people want to show up, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's unique, it's special, it's different every time. But those open houses will facilitate conversation in the chat. And as that chat moves into greater conversation, greater people moving from, oh, I'm checking this open house out, to I want to buy the house. Well, if they want to buy the house, then we're going to move them into a different place, a different platform and conversation. But we're going to start on a very accessible place, a platform where they don't have to show their face, platform where they can just like be themselves, do their thing. And so like we're going to do that on Twitch. So we're going to do a live Bible study on Twitch from the phone, not even from a big gaming computer setup, like just from the phone, hanging out, physical Bible open, chilling, reading, answering questions, whatever that looks like, 10, 15 minutes, knock it out, we're done. And then on another day, we're going to live stream on YouTube, same thing, super casual, from the phone, chilling, hanging out, whatever, reading the Bible. And then as those conversations and the same people keep showing up, we're going to invite those people into a next step, right? And that next step will be a group. So what it's been is online has been, church has these building blocks. There's like these things that mean discipleship to a church, right? And you take those steps and you want every single person to take that step. Online has been, we have these steps we know people, we want people to take, and we know that like we'll get them there, but we've had to make like half steps between the steps to make it more accessible for people online, because those steps are too big of a step for digital. And so that's kind of been where we're at. And I'm excited that we figured it out. It's taken us some time, but I'm really excited about these half steps and how that will change how many people get from A to B and then B to C. So
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who's, when we've done online Bible studies with students, that they don't like to show up and they don't like to show their face, because of all the age demographics I work with, teenagers just hate to be on Zoom or hate to be on that thing. It's but I love that new thing that you're doing, and I love how you're doing it 3 different times and on different platforms. I think that's a really cool thing. You're definitely gonna have to let me know how it goes.
for sure.
I think that's awesome. Okay, so what gets you, as we're kind of wrapping up here, what gets you the most excited as we're moving in, as you've been doing it for over a year now,
Mhm.
what gets you the most excited?
Yeah, I would say like the metaverse, man. The metaverse gets
Yes,
me
I'm glad you
excited.
said that. I'm glad you said that.
I think like, I don't know, man. I just think that as the church is figuring out like what digital ministry, you're going to see some churches that are willing to do whatever it takes, and then you're going to see some churches that are a little scared to take those next steps because they're like, is it worth it, like whatever. But I think the future, whether we like it or not, we have to rationalize that like it's okay if we don't like the direction that the world is headed or that the country is headed, but technology is continuing to move faster and faster and faster. And if we don't try to keep up and use the tools that are being created to reach people, then we're crazy. Like we're absolutely nuts. And so the metaverse might seem like, what's the metaverse? What is it? Is it even real? No, it's not real, but it is real to some people.
Yeah.
And so like that person that thinks the metaverse is real needs to find out that God is real as well. And so like if you're not going there and you're not talking to people in the metaverse, even though it's really uncomfortable, like God calls us to not be in our comfort zone. We need to be reaching people. And so yeah, so I want to see us as churches all across the world move into those territories. Like metaverse pops up and we start seeing people talk about it. Let's plant some churches in the metaverse, like let's do some stuff, some crazy stuff, and put resources into it, and not just like expect things to happen, but like put money where your mouth is. Like let's invest in it. So I'm definitely thinking through, looking through, excited about what the metaverse means for ministry. I don't know if you probably have seen like the Life Church person that got saved in the metaverse with one of their first services there. I think like that challenges me. That definitely like is like, okay, so what does that mean? And I'm just out here like we're trying to figure out what weekend services look like still. And um I think that like we have to do both, right? Simultaneously, let's tweak and configure things we're already doing, but also like let's continue to innovate, let's continue to try new things, even if everything we do isn't perfect. Like God can still move in that. And I think that's a word for every church. If it's not perfect, God can still move in it, right? So like we have to keep trying.
Dude, this is so encouraging to hear, because I think the same way about the metaverse. Again, the metaverse may not be for me, but it's for people. And there are some people in there and they are searching for God, even in the metaverse. And I think it's an opportunity right now for us to explore and figure it out. I mean, we are called to be missionaries, even digital missionaries. And that means going where people are. And if that's the metaverse, then that's an opportunity for us to grow. Dude, this has been so encouraging. I am like super stoked. I do believe like you're like the first ever online student minister. I think the vision that Sandals Church had to have this position, but then they hear your vision, they hear what you're doing. You seem like the perfect person to be leading this way. And man, it's so encouraging talking to you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been like a crazy journey to get here for sure. And like God has done a lot in my life personally to help me realize that this is like what he's called me to do. And also like I just I could be someone on the outside that is pointing fingers at the church, disappointed in what they're doing. But
Mhm.
I decided a long time ago to be the change that I want to see in the church. And that's what's led me to where I am today. Like, instead of being broken and bitter, I decided to like, okay, let God use me in that. And let's see the ship steered in a different direction, that helps reach more people. So
Dude,
I'm just about reaching people, man.
Dude, your humility is infectious. It is amazing. And God is using you. And I just can't wait to see what your ministry looks like 6 months from now, a year from now. And so you and I will be in touch some more, because I'm going to want to pick your brain about a lot of different things. But Taylor, as we kind of wrap up, how can someone connect with you if they're looking for you and like have questions for you? What's a good way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you can email me as always. That's a good one. So Taylor Terpstra at sandalschurch.com. That's my email. I'll always answer. And then my Instagram handle is Taylor Terpstra at Instagram. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Super simple. I'm mostly updated on Instagram. I have a TikTok, but it's more so to observe, not as much to post. So
That's great. Well, I will definitely include all those links on the show notes so that people can
cool.
connect with you. I hope they do. This is fascinating. Well, Taylor, thanks so much for being on the podcast with me today. I really appreciate it.
Sweet. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
All right. So, what did you think? What encouraged you from that interview with Taylor? I mean, my mind was blown. My mind was going like a mile a minute after that interview, because I thought, what can I do? What can my church do to reach students more in an online format. How is that possible for us? Listen, it looks different than online ministry, but students are hanging out there. So what can we do to encourage people in our online ministry? How can we encourage students? They're there. Let's encourage them. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So hit me up on Twitter at @TAPounder. And I've also included Taylor's contact information. If you have questions for him, he would love to talk to you and encourage you as well. So there you have it. That wraps it up for this awesome edition of the Church Digital Sidekick podcast. Again, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, subscribe to it. Go to thechurch.digital and you can check out all my blog posts and podcasts as well, as long as the other voices in there as well. But you can also subscribe to this YouTube version or the audio version on iTunes and Spotify. Is again, the Church Digital Sidekick podcast. I would love for you to subscribe to it today. All right, heroes, well, thanks so much for being with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until next time, have a great one.